Hey, my name is Joe Morgan, and this is my presentation on my sources in my paper. My first source is by William Smith, and it's titled An Immigrant's Narrative, or A Voice from the Steerage, being a brief account of the sufferings of the immigrants in the ship, India, on her voyage from Liverpool to New York in the winter of 1847 to 8, together with a statement of the cruelties practiced. That's definitely a long title, but it's basically an English immigrant's account of his journey from Liverpool to New York. He comes by himself, leaving his family to come have a better life and to start a new life, and then hopefully one day have his family come join him. It's a first-hand account of all the trials and tribulations and the hard life that it is on the months-long passage from England to America. And he writes of how the immigrants were treated. It was extremely horrible. It was awful. People were getting sick, and the crew members did their best to keep the cargo alive, along with the immigrants themselves working to keep each other alive, caring for each other. Oftentimes having to, deal with the friends that they were meeting dying. And, William Smith didn't even think that he would make it to England because of, the way, how horrible it was traveling. Once he finally does get to America, they admit all the sick people to Staten Island Hospital to check them before they're allowed to go out into the general population, and he ends up being admitted from sickness, and he had previously given a journal that was his to a friend that knew a family member of his back home in England. Hopefully, that to think that he just didn't leave his wife and his kids. He wanted to make sure that she knew that something had happened to him if he never contacted her again. But he ended up getting better. And he would write about how horribly the people were treated. They were treated as, if they weren't even human beings. They would not get the care that you would think to get in a hospital. They weren't even attended to by nurses. Half the times they would be chained, to their beds where it was freezing cold and not even near heaters. One thing that through all this William Smith did was he still loved America. He still loved what it represented. And he even writes, that as a kid reading about America, and he loved the idea of the republic and free government. And, he thought that it was, a higher state of civilization than England. And he even writes here that through all of the cruel treatment that him and the others had experienced, it taught him that, quote, neither the character nor the manners of a nation are to be judged by what may be found to exist in some of its institutions, particularly in a hospital. But at that time I had no other means of judging what kind of people the Americans were than what I saw there. They were the first Americans I had ever seen, and I fell into the common error of blaming the many for the crimes of the few. And it's throughout this that he writes, neither the characters nor the manners of a nation are to be judged by what may be found to exist in its institutions. So he realizes that it's not only the first impression that is the complete treatment of them. He knew that America was still a place that, a better life could be found, and the government was free. You had, liberty beyond what they had ever had before. And he just refused to let the actions of those few define or distort his vision of America and what it represented to him. My second source is by M.E. Ravage, called An American in the Making, A Life Story of an Immigrant. And he is a Romanian Jew. And it talks about his humble beginnings in Romania to him moving to New York and his education in Missouri. It's from a viewpoint of a Jew that comes to America and, like many other immigrants, has a strong heritage and a strong cultural sense of what kind of person and what kind of family he has. And he did not want to let that go. Like many immigrants, they didn't come to America to completely rewrite their being, their entire heritage, how they have grown into the people that they were. They didn't come there to erase that. They came there to join with Americans and to add themselves to the structure. That's why people say, America's not really a melting pot. It's actually a mosaic. It's a bunch of pieces of different people combined to create a beautiful picture that is not a melting pot where everything's just, absorbed together to create, one thing. And Ravage writes that he believes that Americans have forgotten America, that through all of the blessings and privileges that they've come from being Native Americans, as in born in America, not immigrants to America, that they have forgotten their own past. And he writes here, quote, "The more I think upon the subject, the more I become persuaded that the relation of the teacher and the taught as between those who were born and those who came here must be reversed. It is the free American who needs to be instructed by the benighted races in the uplifting word that America speaks to all the world. Only from the humble immigrant, it appears to me, can he learn just what America stands for in the family of nations. The alien must know this, for he alone seems ready to pay the heavy price for his share of America. He, unlike the older inhabitant, does not come into his inheritance by accident of birth. Before he can become an American, he must first be an immigrant. More than that, back of immigration lies immigration, and to him alone it is given to know the bitter sacrifice and the deep upheaval of the soul that are implied in those two words." And by that, he's writing that, like I said, they're bringing a heritage with them. They're bringing a strong cultural sense of what kind of person they are, and they're leaving all that they've known behind them to come to America. And when he writes of how, the Americans, the natives, the ones that were born in America have forgotten that once they have done that, they have once done that also. And to not forget that the people that are coming to America are doing that also. And to not just write them off as, people that are just coming to corrupt the structure of America, the makeup of America. He writes that the Americans need to realize what they project to the world, what America itself represents. He says that, quote, "Oh, if I could show you America as we the oppressed people see it," quote. So he's saying that, how the people may view all these people in a negative light, they don't want them coming. But if they realized what America as a society and as a nation represented to these people, then they would realize, we are a beacon of hope to these people, and this is why they come here. And his whole story is just about his complete restructuring of his life from what he knew in Romania, poor, really tight-knit family, everything, to the complete upheaval of what he knew to America and how he was treated and how he still hopes that America has that better life it offers to him. My third source is Albert Mamate. It is Securing the Interest and Cooperation with Foreign-Born People from the Viewpoint of the Foreign-Born. And it is a lecture at an Americanization conference in Washington, D.C. in 1919. Albert Mamate is a Slav. He's the president of the Slavic League of America. And at his conference, he's speaking about the cooperation that Native Americans to make the cooperation with the natives and foreign-born people to make America great for future immigrants and generations. And he's writing that the notion of foreigners coming to America to just make money is false. A great deal come to America for the liberty that it offers, the liberty that is not available to them in their home nations where they come from. People such as the Slavs, like him, they appreciate the land of the freedom, and he writes this from his perspective, so I think he's suggesting more than others. And he believes that these foreigners that are more open and more appreciative of the land of freedom may appreciate it even more than the natives themselves, because they have not suffered under what he writes as oppression and tyranny in their home nations. He just pleads for Americans to get to know the immigrants better without judging them, to cooperate with them and to work for them and to sympathize for them rather than to look down with disdain. And he talks about the idea of forcing English upon the people, the foreign immigrants, that he writes, quote, "Many people, in spite of their mastery of the English language, may be at heart alien, even dangerous enemies, and yet again others, although not able to speak good English, are at heart true and loyal Americans." And he's writing this after the war, so just because somebody spoke English does not mean that they accept and love everything that America has and offers and represents. It is even those that do not speak English but still hold the ideals of America that are true Americans. And he doesn't want Americanization rushed upon these immigrants. He believes that that is just, it only has negative effects to force first generation people to, as soon as they come there, forget everything that they've known, just like Ravage wrote. You know, he didn't want people to forget where they came from. He believes that what it really means to Americanize the alien is not knowledge of the English language, not clothing styles or manners. It is not, engaging in voting. That it's actually the ideals of life that a person believes and holds, and it is that ideal of life that can be attained without having a mastery of English. That a man, quote, "is not foreign because he was born in a foreign land or because he does not speak good English, but because he clings to or is actuated by un-American or anti-American ideals." And what he means by that is it's not where someone came from that makes them foreign to America, that it's the beliefs that they hold, that if they don't line up with the ideals of America, that makes them foreign, and that to become a true American is to hold and exemplify the ideals that America represents. My last source is Li Chu's biography of a Chinaman, and his is a biography from the beginning of his life in China and everything that he's heard about America being negative, and that he realizes that once somebody comes back from the United States to China and is so much more wealthy and is able to do so much for their city or his village, that he wants to do that also. So with the blessing of his family, he goes over and begins working and gets money that he couldn't ever have received before in China. And even though he's treated horribly, he realizes that much of the prejudice that Americans have to Chinese are unfounded, and that the beliefs in his village are not necessarily true, in that Americans are not all bad, he writes. They're not all wizards, as how his grandfather wrote. They still have their faults, and their treatment is bad, but he knows that that's not those people. He just knows that, America still has ways to go, but it's still a good country and is still better than where he is coming from. The argument of my paper is that in face of all these adversities, in face of all these negative hardships and discriminations, that immigrants still look to America as a beacon of hope, a better life than where they come from, and they just take all the negatives and they still filter those and say it's not all of America that is like that. It's just these few people, and that they still believe America is a better life and a better place for them. And my paper just goes through those different these different sources and writes of how they see America, and that the negative representations do not go across the entirety of America. It's just those few, that America at its core is still a place that takes immigrants, that still is a refuge for oppressed people running from tyranny, from awful situations, and it's just how that they want to be a part of that. And the legacy of immigration in America, I believe, is that it has always been a part, and it will always continue to be a part of America, of how it is embedded in the politics of America, that throughout the Chinese Exclusion Act, quota systems. Before that, slavery and just the actual filling of America with these different immigrants has always had politics embedded in it and economics embedded in it, and that the legacy of immigration is still being written in the way that we treat immigrants, accept immigrants, in how we project ourselves to immigrants looking to come here. America has a past of, negative events in immigration history, but also has positive events of families coming here, building their lives, telling their families back home in their native places, their native homes, that come join us. America is great. America is a place where we can be free. We can have freedom of expression, freedom of religion. We can do many things that we were not able to do back home. And they want them to come here, but they don't want them to forget where they came from, because that's what makes America what it is people coming here and bringing different parts of their heritage and culture and just joining it together with what America is and making it greater. And that's my presentation. Thanks.